Olá, eu sou Marina Dias, correspondente da Folha em Washington, e vou entrevistar um dos mais importantes jornalistas americanos, Seymour Hersh, ganhador do prêmio Pulitzer por seu trabalho investigativo que revelou um massacre no Vietnã e autor de outras tantas reportagens que impactaram a política nos Estados Unidos e no mundo. Essa entrevista faz parte de uma série especial do centenário da Folha. Hi, Mr. Hersh. Thank you so much for talking to me. It's a great pleasure. I'd like to start by asking you about a line from your last book. You say that you are a survivor from the golden age of journalism. What has changed since that period in terms of being a reporter? And what do you miss the most from that period?
What I was talking about was when I first got into I went to work for the New York Times in 1972 after being a freelance writer. And there was money. The New York Times, like a lot of newspapers, was doing very well, page after page. You know, I grew up in Chicago, and the papers in Chicago would be 80, 90 pages a day with ads, display ads for dresses and suits, all gone. And so it was a different world. At the New York Times, I had this amazing experience of the first day I started, May 1st, 1972. The North Vietnamese had a major offensive against our puppet government in the South. The editor of the paper, Abe Rosenthal, strange man but interesting, came up to me and he said, "You have your passport?" I just showed up the first day. I was going to spend a week getting adjusted in New York, watch how it works. And I said, "No." He said, "Go home, get it. Go to this office. They'll give you what you need, and get to Paris tomorrow and find out what's going on in the peace talks, what's going on with this offensive." But that was the newspaper business. Nobody ever asked anything of me until 2011 at the New Yorker, when I was asked by the editor, Dave Remnick. I wanted to go see somebody in California, and I just called up the office and said, "Get me a ticket." That's what I did. And he called me and he said, "Can you do it on the phone?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I just came from a financial meeting," and he said, "I was skinned like I was a fish, scaled." The money's disappearing. That's the first time I realized that's a change. The internet and the want ads and the advertising is gone.
You say that you couldn't have done what you did if you had to work with the tools that we use now in journalism, with less time, less money, and also traveling less than you did 40 or 50 years ago. Is your preferred way of doing journalism dying, or do we still have room for your kind of journalism?
There's two problems with the kind of stuff I did. One is that it cost money, to go off and spend 6 or 7 months or 8 months on a project. There's also a complicated personal thing, which is that I've worked in 3 places where I did some good stuff. I did a lot of critical stuff about American bombing in North Vietnam for the Associated Press in the middle 60s when I was there, and I got in terrific trouble with McNamara and with everybody. They were constantly trying to get me, the government was trying to get the AP to fire me or move me, and they eventually did. They eventually reassigned. I quit. I had the same thing at the New York Times. I eventually left there, my own volition, but I felt I was stymied. I was trying to do stuff on American corporations, and it was just I could write anything I want about the CIA or the White House. Writing about American corporations and showing how they're corrupt from beginning to end was really very hard. And the same even at the New Yorker. And I don't blame editors. I would walk into an editor's office, and let's say at the New York Times, and maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and I'd come with me, I would bring a big dead rat full of lice and drop it on his desk and say, "This is the story I want to do. This dead rat full of lice, and it's going to be hard to do. And if I do it, it's going to cost a lot of money to find it. And if I do it, you're going to have a hell of a time to verify it and check it." Maybe about a big corporation. In one case, it was somebody whose who's the head of a big American corporation, was a very, very big friend of the publisher of the Times at the time. They were social friends. And it was a corrupt, and I would say it's going to cost you money. You're going to lose readers. You're going to get sued. But I want to do it. So that only can go on for a few times. Who needs somebody doing that? You know, why do you want that?
Do you think that without money, is it impossible to do something like that? I mean, get to investigate and publish something big?
You have to be able to go see people. You can't do it on the phone. The biggest problem you have right now with what's going on with newspapers right now, major newspapers, is that they can't afford to cover the cities anymore. What started to happen, I don't know where it's at, but I remember giving a lot of talks in major city journalism departments, where in particularly in Boston College or Boston University, where by this third year of journalism, you were covering the city, and they set up their own news coverage of the city because the papers weren't doing it. So we've had a serious decline of local coverage in America because there's just not enough money. And you find these big chains, the Gannett's, and there's 4 or 5 chains that now control something like 80% of the papers. And they send the news, they have certain stories that everybody has to run. And so the coverage that you're getting locally is really different now. The local universities and colleges try and do some of it. There's something else going on now that's really very popular that I don't fully understand why. Podcasts. Podcasts are now doing a lot of long-form journalism.
Do you think that making people pay for information through paywalls or other means is a good way to keep journalism, professional journalism, alive? Or does making news free make it more democratic?
I hate paywalls. And when I was at the New Yorker, I left there about 2013 or 12 or 13. One of the things I insisted on was any story, I only did 2 or 3 a year, but I would work 3 or 4 months on them. No paywall. And eventually the last one, they did a paywall after telling me they would not. I don't think there wasn't trickery, it just was done. And so I don't like paywalls. And, but because I grew up in a different world, I think the younger generation is more open to them, maybe, than I am. So that may be a solution. I don't know how much money you can collect off that to make it work. It's a whole different structure now. And it's the English word is inchoate. It's not coordinated. It's not ready yet. It's up in the air, and we're facing huge changes. What's going to happen is the media, including the major newspapers, are going to lose a great deal of viewers. They're going to lose readers and viewers in the next year or two, because Biden will calm down things. The new government's coming. Everybody got a break. Trump gave everybody 4 years off. They can just all not worry about paywalls because everybody wanted to read about Trump. When I first started complaining about New York Times reporters on TV every night, and I asked somebody connected, and he said, no, they're pushed to go. The management wants them to go on. They get paid for going on CNN. They get some consulting fee. Sometimes it's probably more than what they make at the paper, but because it's all visual. You get people to watch them, and they'll go online to read the stories. And that's part of the package. Well, that's a whole new world for me, I'll tell you. Do I want Mr. Bezos to own the Washington Post? Do I want some billionaire, one of the IT guys out there, the guy running Google or one of those companies, to buy a big newspaper and keep it alive? Do I want that? Do I really believe that there's no self-censorship at all about the Washington Post and Amazon, which is hiring practices and is firing? Do I really believe that they would do a major investigation into health problems? I don't think so. So do I want the government to own a newspaper? No. Look at what's going on with BBC and the constant fights they have with the government. So what is the solution? Having good, serious media? We don't know yet.
You said that you don't believe in being neutral or unbiased in journalism. Can you explain that to me? Is that possible for a reporter?
No, you can't be possible. Of course not. And the way it worked, I remember being on a panel with a very nice man, Leonard Downey, who was executive editor of the Washington Post for about 16 years. just retired a few years back and now teaches. And he was asked, it was a convention, this must have been 10 years ago, it was a convention of student journalists. And he was asked about how to be objective. How can newspaper people be objective? And he said, well, we're in the Washington Post, we have a rule, you can't go to demonstrations. And he said, as a matter of fact, I don't vote because I don't want anybody, I don't want anybody to think whether I'm Democrat or Republican. Of course, I went crazy. I just jumped on him and I said, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. Of course you have to vote. We're citizens. And of course you have emotions and feelings. And the way it works for me is because I hated the Vietnam War so much. I had learned a lot about, I covered it for the Associated Press in the 60s. That made me realize that when I reported on it, I had to be so much more thorough. I mean, I couldn't let my hatred, it would drive me to the story, but it wouldn't drive the reporting. And the reporting had to be even better than it would have been if I'd been a supporter. In other words, there's nothing wrong with having passion for something. It could be a passion for animal rights. And there's an issue there. You should have feelings and emotions and passions that drive your reporting, but make it have a higher standard. If you have a passion for something, that drives you to be a better reporter about it, because you also know your passion can be viewed as a disadvantage. So I don't think it's a real issue.
Do you think the American press shares responsibility in creating the political and social chaos the U.S. has faced in recent years?
We really share in not reporting enough about the other side. I'm talking about the mainstream media that I read, the Washington Post, even the Wall Street Journal, which I think has done really quite well for a newspaper owned by conservative people. The reporting there is much better. Particularly they actually do more foreign coverage. I think the major papers and the cable television didn't really give us enough information about this incredible world of fascism, if you will, extremism, anti-Americanism, anti whatever it is, anti-government, racist. I don't think we had nearly enough reporting about it. There are some public media did, but not the major newspapers.
What could the press have done better? Why do these people hate the press so much? And how could the press do better covering the Biden administration in comparing what it did during Trump's administration?
I think about that all the time. I was watching the primary. There were, I think, 21 candidates against him, and he took them all down one by one and he was a know-nothing. He has no information. He's got a certain feral, like a wild animal cunning and survival instinct. And so he came in under ridicule. And the first thing he did, I thought Trump's idea of, well, I'll go talk to this guy Putin. I can talk to him. I'll go talk to the guy in North Korea. I'd go to Tehran, if there was a good enough hotel. I think that was the issue, maybe. And so I didn't mind that. And the very first thing he wanted to do was go to North Korea. And of course, he didn't know anything really, but he had people that did. And the press, from the moment they saw it, they beat him up. And oh my God, you want to talk to Russia?
And the press was reporting and reporting. Do you think it was a mistake?
No, but it's become a reality. Russia did it. And the Biden people also believe in that. The Biden's done good appointments, I think, in many areas. National security, too much of the old anti-Russian, Cold War. We've got to do something about Syria. We've got to do something about China. We've got to do something about Russia. Let's just tend to our own knitting, as they say, that cliche here. Let's stop worrying about things we don't have evidence for. There's no evidence. They've never produced any evidence. And yet it's accepted by the press. So I see that as an ongoing problem here constantly. The Trump people really believed in American, they believed, what is the phrase, exceptionalism, and we still believe in American exceptionalism. When I was at the New York Times, my one complaint used to be, I had a wonderful time there. They let me do what I want. I had a lot of fun, I did a lot of good work for them. But I kept complaining that you guys really think America's exceptional. The answer is we're not. And we've shown it quite a bit in the last 4 years.
Do you think it poses a major threat to democracy when leaders like Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro and also Donald Trump constantly attack the press? Is this a real danger?
This is more extreme than usual. Your president's extremely extreme. That's not atypical. You will survive, and the next person that comes will not be as fanatic, I don't think. I think it's hard to do. And here, the same thing here. We're into a different world right now. You see authoritarianism growing around the world. Hungary, I mean, there's many places it's much more extreme. In the short run, it sucks. What's going on now, the attacks on the press are and they work for certain. They certainly worked in America, the hostility towards the press. And we have a president that attacks it just like your president has attacked anybody who objects to what he does. I saw what happened to Gun Greenwald, and when he began to report about what's going on, I watched that. It was not a good time. It can't get worse. It can't get worse than it is now. The attacks and the hostility towards the press. And what's amazing is how easy it is for an elected leader or a leader to turn on the press and get support. I don't think that's a permanent part of life. That has to do with when you have a fascist-leaning, undemocratic leader who leads by threats. It's just that there's more than a few now in the world. We've always had the Pinochets and others. Argentina had its share too in Latin America, certainly in Latin America and Central America. But there seems like it's a propensity more and more. I mean, I don't like what happens in Southeast Asia. Some of the countries are very, very problematic too. It's a one world now because of media, because of the internet and the satellites. It's a one world, and the picture has to be optimistic because everybody can see what they couldn't see 30, 40, 50 years ago. You can see the other side. In other words, and now if there was a Me Line now in an American war, there'd be a satellite overhead reporting it, taking real life pictures of it. So there is that whole notion that the world's there to be copied and seen. Ultimately, I'm worried about the fact that the old American notion of the newspaper. We used to have afternoon papers in America. When I grew up in Chicago, there were 4 dailies, 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. I think the lack of reliance on newspapers and more on visual things is very troubling.